Oftentimes, we're told to choose between two different things. We can't have both. And when we're playing console games or really even PC games, we're choosing between whether we want the highest frame rate possible or the best graphics possible. Well, what if I told you you could have both? That's where we insert with Game Motion Plus. So before I begin, I want to tell you that every piece of footage that you're going to see on this screen is done with Game Motion Plus, unless stated otherwise on the bottom. And everything you see will be an off-screen clip from the Samsung Q90T. Alright, now let's talk about motion interpolation. For some reason, motion interpolation is such a bad word in the TV community. I get it. The first thing people tell you to do when you buy a TV is to turn off every motion setting possible. You know, it feels like I'm the only one that talks about Game Motion Plus sometimes. And I really feel like I don't give it enough credit either. I don't give you guys enough content with Game Motion Plus, and I don't talk about it enough. I should definitely be talking about this more since nobody else is. Really, Game Motion Plus is such a huge game changer when it comes to buying a TV for gaming. And I think going forward, you'll see this in more TV manufacturers. They'll try to get the frame time down for motion interpolation and be able to give you that low latency experience while gaming and still have motion interpolation. Currently, it seems like only Samsung managed to do this with Game Motion Plus. And I'll talk about the benefits of Game Motion Plus in a second, but first let's address latency. Usually we're sitting at about 80 to 100 milliseconds on our lag time when it comes to motion interpolation being added to game mode. But with Game Motion Plus, you're really sitting at a total of 24 milliseconds as opposed to a total of 12 milliseconds. So really not a huge impact. And unless you're playing a game that is like competitive and demands you to have the best lag possible, the best latency possible, then you're gonna not want to use Game Motion Plus. But this is really only for competitive games. I think that Game Motion Plus should be used on a lot of different titles that are more slower paced or even just like action games, kind of like Spiderman. Games that really where latency doesn't impact your game too much. 24 milliseconds really won't be impacting you in most games anyway. So why would you want to use Game Motion Plus? Well, I use it for games that are 30 frames per second that I want to play like 60 frames per second. See, it's simple. The smoother the gameplay, the better the experience. And this is why constantly gamers are demanding that games be in 60 frames per second. Oh yeah, that reminds me, if you haven't already, make sure you are watching this in 60 frames per second. You can change that in the bottom right. So the biggest question I get is, can you actually tell the difference between 60 frames per second and 30 frames per second with Game Motion Plus on 30 frames per second? So the really only way you can test this is by finding a game that can run both at 30 and 60, which is Spiderman. And that's why I'm using it for this demonstration. And in the background, you should see Miles Morales on Rhinos smashing through the crowd, just like you should be smashing the like button. Alright, so let's talk about the differences, what I'm seeing on the screen. When I had Game Motion Plus on, I used the high fidelity mode, which gave me the best graphics possible. And when I had Game Motion Plus on, I couldn't tell the difference between Game Motion Plus with high fidelity and performance mode without Game Motion Plus. That's how good Game Motion Plus is. Another reason why you would want to use Game Motion Plus is for frame pacing. If you ever had played a game that has really bad frame pacing, then you will know that this stutter and this little lag from here and there, from frame to frame, is just very, very annoying. And this can actually be fixed with Game Motion Plus sometimes. I have to say sometimes because there is times where frame pacing is so bad that not even Game Motion Plus will fix it. But I did have an example on Mario 64 for the Switch where that did have bad frame pacing and Game Motion Plus smoothed it out and made it really feel like a great smooth 60 frames per second experience. And I didn't have that judder that I had when I didn't play in Game Motion Plus. So yes, Game Motion Plus is awesome and everybody should really use it. And if you haven't tried it yet, I just encourage you to use it. I do have to say this about Game Motion Plus though. If the game is going to give you frame drops all the time, then that's not going to help. Game Motion Plus won't solve that. The only thing that can really help with that is going to be VRR. Unfortunately, VRR and Game Motion Plus, they just don't work together. They're not meant to work together. The way their technology works is too similar and it just wouldn't work because it would really just create a lot of weird frames and it would be juddery and laggy and it just would not be a good experience. That's why it's disabled. Speaking of disabled, why are people telling us to turn off motion interpolation on gaming? I really don't understand that. I think that is great. And for movies, I can understand why you wouldn't want motion interpolation on. For movies and TV, I absolutely turn it off. I don't have any motion settings on for movies or TV. But for gaming, I definitely use Game Motion Plus. And I do say that I use motion settings for sports as well. When I watch NFL or anything like that, I always use motion interpolation. But really, you could be different. You may like motion interpolation for your movies and TVs. Just try it out and see if you like it. Some people do, some people don't. I'm one of those that just don't. It seems like TV review sites, TV news sites, and even other YouTubers, they just didn't give Game Motion Plus any shine, any credit. And I think the reason for this is because, well, they're not gamers. They don't game. They don't really talk about gaming too much. You know, they don't really have the best interest in mind for gamers. That's why we always hear about movies and how movies look and how TV looks. But really, that's why I made this channel, because there's a shift. There's a lot of people that play video games more than they used to. And there's not enough coverage on how TVs and gaming work together and what's the best TVs for gaming and kind of give you the reasons why. That was my main objective with this, and I hope that I am helping you guys out somewhat. So in conclusion, I think Game Motion Plus should absolutely be highlighted as a core feature when we're pitting TVs against each other. And I do think that, like I said, going forward, we're going to see more and more people try to get something like Game Motion Plus in their TVs. All right, let's talk about the settings that you can use to get the most out of Game Motion Plus. You know, I've talked about this before, but anybody that's new, let's go over it. So there's two things you want to look for with Game Motion Plus. What is the frame rate, and is the frame rate stable? If it is stable at whatever frame rate it runs at, then I say yes, use Game Motion Plus. If you are trying to run 30 frames per second, you're going to want to set the judder to 10 and the blur to 0. If you're running a game in 60 frames per second, you're going to want to run the blur to 10 and the judder to 0. I also want to bring your attention to the screen. Notice that when I turned off Game Motion Plus, all of a sudden we had the rolling scan lines back. And at first, I didn't see this, but I started to see it more and more now. And the reason why I didn't see it is because I play in Game Motion Plus. And when you play in Game Motion Plus, these scan lines aren't there. But you can clearly see that when I'm not in Game Motion Plus, it's there. And then I turn on Game Motion Plus, and then it's gone. So that's how you fix the scan lines, and inverse ghosting is also fixed like that. So if you do have inverse ghosting, that will be a way to get rid of it. Lastly, I want to talk about how this can benefit PC gamers. So as you know, PC gamers have to rely on their graphics card. And not everybody is fortunate to always upgrade their graphics card. Sometimes we are forced to play at 30 frames per second with the best graphics possible. We are not able to do 60 frames per second. Well, this is where Game Motion Plus can help. We can get that 60 frames per second experience if we have a stable 30 frames per second frame rate. And that will give us the desire we need without wanting to upgrade our graphics card constantly. So it's a win-win. All right, well, that about wraps it up. What do you guys think about Game Motion Plus? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you have tested it, tell me how you like it. Do you like it on or off? Or Is it something you want to see in future TVs as well that aren't Samsung branded? I'd love to hear that as well. And if you absolutely hate it, tell me that too. I am open to all criticism and comments. If you guys are curious to see more videos on the Samsung Q90T, make sure you click the videos in the link above. And also, there is more to come on 2021 TVs as news comes out. I will cover that. And I also have plans to review some of these TVs as well. Still got to work out how I'm going to do that financially, but you can count on me having some reviews on this channel, even if I have to borrow some of these TVs. All right, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope I see you in the next one.